Hello and welcome to another edition of Open Door. I'm Vince Robinson, and my guest today is Joyce Pleasant Howard. She is a licensed independent chemical dependency counselor, clinical supervisor. Did I
That's correct.
get that right?
You got that right. And then the ICCS, which is International Certified Clinical Supervisor. So there's two supervisory certifications that I have.
Okay. Now there's a little bit to unpack here because you are Joyce Pleasant Howard.
Yes.
And that's a mouthful in addition to that long title that you just gave me. And you have an entity called Pleasant People, Inc.
Yes.
Okay, now, your last name is Pleasant. You acquired that name through marriage.
Correct.
And the name of your business is Pleasant People.
Yes.
And you're married to someone named Howard.
Yes.
So you are a Pleasant Howard, and you have Pleasant People, Inc.
Yes.
And on top of all of that, you're training people, you're training chemical dependency counselors through workshops and other things, correct?
Well, that's twofold.
Partly.
It's twofold,
Okay.
right? Because there's people who want to become counselors that are not counselors, not certified yet, and that's who I train. But I also train people that need to renew their license. And so they attend workshops because I'm a provider for the Ohio Chemical Dependency Professional Board.
Okay. So I'm happy to know that you are the wife of Mr. Rick Howard Bay. I've known Rick for some time. I can see that he is eternally blessed, and it shows in my interactions with him because whenever he talks about you, it's in glowing terms. He showed me some photographic evidence, so I know that you're having a positive impact on him as well as all of the others that you encounter. Tell me what opened the door to your idea that you wanted to help people with their addictions?
Well, Vince, it was my own personal experience. And after that experience, it was sort of like I'm at home. After I made my experience that I had, my own experience with substance abuse disorder. And once I gave in, surrendered, and decided to go for help, then after then, my heart just went out to, I want to help people. And it's two reasons why also. I don't know if it's okay to say this, but I used to be a drug dealer. And so the pain and suffering that I experienced from the reality that I had harmed all these people, that's what made me dedicate even more of my life to becoming a counselor.
Okay. It could be argued that the people that you were, I guess, supplying, for lack of a better term, made a choice to engage in that. So you were enabling them, but not necessarily causing them to do that. But you had an epiphany, and I guess your realization was you facilitating their addiction was problematic, so you wanted to do something about it.
Yes.
At any point, did you struggle with some type of an addiction?
Yes. I later myself became addicted to my own drugs. I was addicted for a long time, at least 10 years prior to me making a decision to come into recovery. Because I used from adolescent, like teenager, and a lot of people say gateway drug is marijuana. I differ. It's nicotine, because I used to steal my parents' Pall Malls. And so that was the first that I started to ingest nicotine, and it graduated. Because see, the way the brain operates, it likes the reward. And that was my reward at first, the nicotine. First I couldn't stand it. You know how you gag when you take a puff? But then as the tolerance increased in my brain, I continued to seek the reward. So that's why I ended up at the end of my addiction. Well, when I came into recovery, 2 years after I came into recovery, I quit smoking because I realized I didn't want something else holding me hostage.
So you went from smoking cigarettes, and then at a certain point you said that you were involved in selling drugs.
Yes.
So how did that come about?
I was a single parent, and being a single parent, actually I was married another time prior to the marriage that I have before from the Pleasant name, and my ex-husband, he was alcoholic. And so alcohol took him out the home away from myself and my other 2 sons. I had 3 sons. One of my sons he's deceased because he overdosed in 2017. But trying to make a decision at that early age, I couldn't really make a sound decision because I was a high school dropout. And I grew up in the after hours. So what I knew more about was alcohol. So that was my direction. It was like, that's the direction you take. So I had been involved in illegal drugs growing up as a kid in a household where there was illegal involvement with alcohol and gambling. So I had a lot of addictions coming, to get to this point. There were a lot.
Yeah, you were exposed to quite a bit in life, and then after all of that, you dropped out of high school, and then fast forward, you're operating on a master's degree level. So
yes.
that's quite an accomplishment in life. When did the light bulb go on in your head that said, I got to make a difference, I got to make a change?
I could tell you it was, I would say, 6 months after I got clean. I knew I wanted to help people. It was like I just knew I had to do something. And so it's always been in my heart, helping people. I've always did that. But in the wrong way, like someone loaning them money, housing somebody, things like that. So after I got clean, the first 6 months I was clean, I rented a house, a huge house, and myself and about 5 other women went into that house, and I was calling myself helping them to get a start. And we were all in recovery, And it was a mistake because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to help, And of course, there's a lot of things that go on, but I didn't know the dynamics that was going to take place with all of us going through psychological withdrawal and some of us with physical withdrawal. All I knew is I just wanted to help these women, and we'd be in this huge house.
Okay. And then you took a step towards doing it the right way. So
yes.
could you tell us what that journey was about?
Well, like I said, it was about a year of opening my house to the women, and I leased a house to do that. But in 2002, I opened up a house called My Sister's Keeper in Lorain County. And there, women were referred from the penitentiaries there, because it was just in my heart. Plus, I was the director of a women's and babies inpatient program in Lorain County, and it's called The Key. And I was there from 1993 to 1997, as far as the women's house there in treatment. That was inpatient treatment. But the women's house, The Key, that I opened up was after I had gotten ill, and then I recovered, and then I went, opened up a house. Because I had two bouts with systemic lupus erythematosus.
Wow. That's quite a bit on top of having the addiction issue and then becoming clean.
Well, that was prior to me getting clean.
Before you got clean.
The diagnosis of systemic lupus came after I came into recovery. Actually, I was 50 years old when that happened. Mm-hmm. But before then, because I got clean at 33 years old.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm looking to understand is the educational component, because you did mention that you were a high school dropout.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden now you're in college classes.
Yes. What I did, Vince, I went to community college and got my GED from there. And then I continued to attend workshops. I attended workshops in an Ohio Institute of Addiction Studies. Dr. William Mock was my instructor. And I attended workshops, and at the 10-year period of me being a counselor, they grandfathered me in. That's what they call grandfather to a higher level, because of me in the field for 10 years. And then some more work experience, some more interaction with the different agencies, because the different modalities, different types of like inpatient treatment, outpatient, criminal justice. Like I mentioned in my bio about working at Grafton, it's called just had a little blank, therapeutic community.
Okay.
On the farm, and that's where the men are in treatment there in Grafton. And so I've went inpatient, like I said, outpatient, men, women. I've counseled adolescents, you know, so it's been across the field, and worked in detox. So I got my share of experience in the whole field to know where I wanted to go eventually, and my ending was partly to know that I wanted to be in private practice. That's what it was. That was my goal, to work for myself. Okay. I'll say it like that.
It's really a testimony to the strength of one's will, because you went from being a victim to being an advocate and a champion for those who have been affected the way you had been affected at some point. You mentioned the fact that you were attending these workshops, and now you facilitate workshops.
Yes, that's who I learned from. I learned from my instructor, Dr. William Mock, and he had wanted me to assist him in, you know, putting together the workshops when he would travel, and I said I could do this.
Mm-hmm. So at a certain point, the Pleasant People Inc. was born. Could you talk about the genesis of that entity?
Well, it was born out of, I could say, some pain and some suffering and tragedy. My husband, deceased husband, had been clean for 10 years. We both had worked in the field of chemical dependency. We went to school together, and he was the director of a men's facility called Compass House in Lorain County for men, and I was a program director for the Key, the women's program, which Lorain County Alcohol and Drug Abuse Services at that time, LACADA, they had the agency. And my husband, ex-husband, he relapsed after 10 years. And when he relapsed, because he had been involved with the court system, he had been an addict and had spent like 17 years in a penitentiary. So when he relapsed after 10 years of being clean and involved with the courts and, you know, having our careers like at a heightened point, they blackballed him. They blackballed him in Lorain County. And so I said, when he got out of treatment, because I set boundaries, he couldn't live in the house with me when he had relapsed. And when he got out, I told him you have to go to a halfway house, because I know how to set boundaries, like, 'cause I was a member of a 12-step program for family members of addicts and alcoholics, you know, because I had to save myself, you know. And at that time, he did, and I did a lot of praying, like whether or not if I was going to allow him to come back to the home. And I got my answer, and I did, and I opened up Pleasant People Inc., sent the paperwork in when he was in treatment. Okay. Because I knew it was going to be hard for him as a black man, as a ex-criminal, ex-offender, you know, and recently relapsing. And so that's when I started Pleasant People.
Okay. I sometimes ask difficult questions, so if it's not something that you feel comfortable with, you know, I personally appreciate your right and respect your right to not answer. But I'm just curious, after he was involved in doing so much good for others and understanding, you know, what chemical dependency could do, what do you think it was? What was the tipping point that caused him to relapse?
Pain medication. He had an injury in his back, and he had been suffering with it for years. And then he started getting pain medication from a doctor that, with that time out in Lorain County, wasn't the best doctor. It was not a legal doctor. He was legal, but did illegal activity. And so when I found out that he was getting high off the medication, the opiates, painkillers, and then from that triggered him to go to his drug of choice, which was heroin.
Okay.
So he went back to IV drug use.
Yeah. It's really an important issue to understand right now, because when you talk about opioids or opiate addiction, it's a very prominent thing right now. And many of the drugs, as I understand it, are way more powerful than they have to be. And what happens is people start using those things, and then that addiction kicks in, and it can be extremely problematic. Can you talk about what you know about the strength and the efficacy of some of the pharmaceutical substances that are out there now?
Well, when you talk about, you know, they have fake fentanyl. You know, they're putting fentanyl in everything, marijuana, everything. Because like when I was mentioning, I had 3 sons. When my son died in 2017, he had an overdose. And what happened, it was carfentanil. That's a analog of fentanyl. And I believe that he had no idea that if he put alcohol, because if you put alcohol and fentanyl together, you die instantly. And that's what had happened that day. He had drank. According to what my other son had said, he had stopped by and had a bottle, and a little short bottle, and had told him that he had been drying out, that he hadn't had anything in a long time, like about 3 or 4 weeks, because we didn't talk to him for that time. And so he he drank it, and the combination, because it's dangerous to mix drugs. And he overdosed, right after he had took the drink.
Mm. They're lacing marijuana with fentanyl now.
Yes, and it's so sad because people, they come to treatment and they get tested, or as far as the urinalysis, and they're telling them, they're saying, I don't use fentanyl. And they're like, I only use marijuana. I'm like, no, there's fentanyl in there. And see, that's to give that extra kick so you keep coming back, as far as to keep a patron keep coming. Like when you make something stronger. Like remember when the nicotine used to be much stronger. Some companies were putting more nicotine than others, and you could outsell. They were outselling the other industries, as far as the tobacco industries.
Yeah, well, what they say about tobacco now is that in addition to the nicotine, they put a lot of other chemicals in the tobacco that enhance the addictive properties of it and make it a harder thing to kick. We talked about this offline before we started the show, but there's another drug that many people are not talking about, and that is sugar specifically, and in general, food is an addiction.
Yes.
Is there anything that you can share with us about the addiction to food and in ways that you might be able to help folks with that issue?
Well, it doesn't matter what you're addicted to. The thing about it is the reward system that's on the brain. And anything that feels good, looks good, smells good, you can become addicted to it because of the reward system. And different things, and I'm sure you've heard about dopamine, So you have some things that you like, and you get a dopamine amount of dopamine, and then there's some things that you get a huge amount of dopamine. And that's where your drugs come into play. And food can be the same way. I like to explain to people, like when I'm teaching my students, I tell them, I say, first of all, especially a person who don't understand about addiction, I say, if you peel back your scalp and say this cup of water right here has either sugar, because sugar is a stimulant, so you pour it on top of it and just pull the scalp back and let it rip. What do you think the brain will do with all that sugar on top of it? And you're powerless. You can't do anything about it because it's on top of the brain. Even though people inject and they orally drink and they pop pills, it goes through the bloodstream, but it ends up here. And that's where you have no power and control of. You can't control what's up under the scalp. No one can. And so the more the reward system on anything you do, whether it's gaming, for gambling, sex, the reward system, that's where the addiction can come to play.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do to rewire the way the brain functions if someone is getting their
dopamine rush?
Their dopamine rush or whatever.
Yeah.
What do you do to rewire the brain so that they're not forced to stimulate themselves that way?
Well, I believe that you have to have a conversation. Education is a lot. For lack of knowledge, you perish. So if a person doesn't understand, first of all, what the substance does, because I ask people, why do you drink? And they say like, well, because I want to. Oh, well, what do you mean you want to? What do you get? Because it's an effect that you're seeking. So some people will tell me, I have to relax. So I say, well, you mean you can't relax without a drink? Is that what you're telling me? Is that the only way you can relax? And then I ask them, and they say, well, sometimes, when I want to talk to somebody, so that means they use it to help them not be shy, to give them false courage. Go to a job interview, sometimes, or test anxiety. So they take a drink. So I ask them, you mean you can't test without taking a drink? So that's like the logic, letting the person see logically what reason you're using. And some people say, well, peer pressure. Well, when I go to be sociable. I'm going with my friends. I say, well, you mean you can't be sociable without drinking alcohol? And then I go back to that picture about peeling the scalp back. even a drop, an ounce, any amount on the brain, because you have to visualize this, Vince, on top of the brain, because that's where it's going. That's the ultimate place it's going, you know. And if you visualize, I don't care what amount, there's got to be a change in the behavior, because it's going to affect every part of the body: the nose, the ears, the smelling, the the taste, the eyesight, you know.
Okay, so in essence, you're using a therapeutic counseling process to alter the way people think about what they're doing versus someone goes to a psychiatrist and the psychiatrist writes a prescription for a drug. Mm-hmm. So could you talk about the process? I mean, you just gave us a little bit about it, but could you talk about the process? Does it take months of counseling, or is it something that could be accomplished in a matter of weeks or with a workshop? Each
individual is different. First of all, it's a person's first having to admit they have a problem. That's where it starts there, admitting it, admitting the unmanageability that's come about in their life because of the drugs or whatever the lifestyle that they're doing, you know, if it's negative. And then willing to do something about it. You know, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't get up and do something, then you're stuck right there. And so it's engagement, like as far as a counselor, a rapport that you build with people, so it's personable. When people come to treatment or when they get screened or get the assessment, that first reaction to coming in the door, looking on the walls, seeing if it's an invite, like the person who the gatekeeper is, you know, if they're friendly or not, because we got to think, the people come to you and they're sad, they're angry, they're desperate. You know, you get the feelings, they feel guilty, ashamed. So they're coming somewhere and they're hoping somebody is not going to look down on them. They're hoping somebody really is going to help them. Now, everybody that comes to treatment don't come there willingly. Sometimes you're forced. I don't care how you get there. At least if you come there, we get the opportunity as counselors to plant some seeds. And hopefully, I don't care if you go back and relapse, because part of that process of recovery is relapse, because everybody don't believe us, and we tell them their brain is wired or they have an addiction, the brain is, has an addiction, and that's what it's called, a brain disease. The American Medical Association has determined it's a brain disease, right up there with the other mental health issues. I mean, like diagnosis.
Well, some folks might say, well, it runs in the family.
That's like what they call predisposition, you know. And like if a person has their eating habits, if say you got a family, everybody eats a whole lot, then more than likely, if once you ingest it, you probably genetically going to gain weight and you're going to be an overeater. So the family will have the obesity in the family, you know. Like I say, it's a predisposition because, again, there you go with environment. Environment has a lot to do with it. Remember I talked about growing up in the after hours? I looked through that door where the peephole where everybody was on the other side, and I heard things that sounded like fun. I saw things that sounded like fun. I couldn't wait to one day be a little older or just get around those things. And I was already around it because my parents had the gallons of liquor in the closet where they got from the liquor store.
You know, what really is interesting about that is that a lot of the folks who were in there after hours having all that fun, it was fueled by their addictions.
Yes. And they had multiple addictions because my parents had a gambling house. And the whole house was smoky from the nicotine.
Mm-hmm. So the folks that come to you, they come because they may have a genuine interest in changing the situation, but you also mentioned that some folks are forced to come.
Yes.
How do you deal with people who are there but don't really want to be there?
I just still speak truths to them. See, it's not my job to make them believe me. I'm just supposed to offer the information. And sometimes I will tell them my story. You know, some agencies will allow you to do that. By me being in private practice, I tell my story, when I need to.
Okay. So you are a clinical supervisor in addition to all the other words that precede that.
Yes.
So I'm interpreting that to mean that you are training folks who are learning about this. Talk about how you progressed from being someone who had that direct relationship with those who are being counseled to someone who counsels the counselors.
Well, when I say clinical supervisor, that means I supervise counselors. So that means I've had counselors as far as me being their supervisor in an agency, my own agency, because I have a driver's intervention. Rick and I have a driver's intervention program as well, where the state, if a person get a DUI, they're court ordered to come to our agency and go to a 72-hour driver's intervention program. But as far as the counseling piece, again, I train people and I oversee their work. So it's like they get a supervision, as far as with me, like the counselors that I have that I've trained, I hire the people that I train because I know what's in them. I know ethically what's in them, and I'm very strong on ethics, because there's a lot of, sad to say, a lot of agencies where you don't have as many professionals that need to be as far as practicing ethics. And so our clients go to these agencies wanting help, but then they might look at the staff and say, you know what, you probably need to be here,
So you do have a website, and I took the liberty of looking at it, and I can see a lot of different aspects to it. We just have a few moments left. Could you talk about some of the other aspects of it?
Well, as far as the workshops that I provide, I'm also a published author. And when I got sick, remember I told you I got sick, the systemic lupus, it came out of remission in 2002, and that's when I had kidney failure. And so then that's what made me pull back a little bit and go back further into private practice versus public, working with the public at different agencies. And so I really pride myself on trainings, good education for counselors, And so that's where I'm mostly my best, giving them good information, and especially around ethics, because they need to know life and death is in our pen. What we write down, if we make the wrong error, it can be a positive where it should be a negative as far as a urine test, and that person could be on their way down 71 to the penitentiary because of our mistakes. And time needs to be looked at when we're working with people as an opportunity to help. That's very special, Vince.
Okay. Well, Joyce, it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. We're going to make sure that people will have access to your website if they're interested in getting some counseling or they're interested in participating in any of the workshops or other services that you provide. They'll be able to go there.
Well, pretty soon I'm going to start working back with families. Codependency is a diagnosis, family members of addicts and alcoholics. Because I used to offer education at St. Vincent's Charity, which was there like every other Saturday before the pandemic. And so I'm going to start that back in my own practice because family members don't have a clue what's going on with their family members.
Well, we'll look forward to that, and we'll look forward to our audience joining us on the next edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Vince.
And thank you for joining us. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make today your best day. Peace.